April 1st, 2023. And at my house, this was never April Fool's Day. This was always celebration of my oldest sister's birthday. So we did not do any jokes. So I'm going to start this legislative coffee by wishing my oldest sister, Cindy, a happy birthday. I want to go over, and all of you are faces that I've seen here before, but I have to read the rules, or I'm required to read the rules. We want to thank everybody who is certainly watching, but if you're here in person, thank you, because you got out of bed, you showed up at City Hall, you want to be a part of the process, and that is good. We're going to ask everyone that if you have a question, just please ask a question, not to go on and on and on. No pontificating, no sermons. So please just keep it short and ask your question. We ask you not to applaud and turn your cell phones off. I almost think it's silly that we do that. We used to pay for ringtones, and now our phones have been silent for, I don't know, a decade or so, right? Want to thank the sponsors today, the Ottawa Area Chamber of Commerce and the Legislative Action Committee, the Franklin County Farm Bureau Association, and AT&T. Our platinum sponsors are Price Chopper, Calmar Ottawa, Hasty Awards, Advent Health Ottawa, Kansas State Bank, and Ottawa University. My name is Sarah Kaler, if you don't know. I'm also working alongside Lewis Reed today, who is going to hold the mic. So thank you, Lewis, for doing that. I do want to point out that today I have the distinct pleasure of announcing his first day on the job. Ryland Miller is our new chamber president. Stand up, Ryland. And today is truly his first day on the job, and so welcome to the position, Ryland. We're glad you're here. Thank you for adventurously taking on the chamber, but doing it on April Fool's Day. So thank you. We appreciate it. And I also want to thank Matt and the City of Ottawa for providing this facility and for filming today. I have started with a little bit of fun because it is April 1st. And we're going to start, instead of having you introduce yourself, I'm going to ask you for a 3, 2, 1 question. So there should be little pieces of paper. I know there are, at least in my spot, up in front, and a pen. 3, 2, 1. 3 bills, representatives, that we may not address today, but are really important to you and points of interest to you. So 3 of those. 2, besides the people that are sitting with you on the dais today, share with the audience who are 2 people, 1 female and 1 male, that you look to for mentorship and or guidance at the Capitol. And last, with Easter just 1 week away, tell us about your favorite holiday and why. And either one of you can go first.
I think I have fried my brain.
Right? It was a long week.
While you're thinking, here's what I'm going to do. I did print out, or thank you to Ryland who printed out, legislative member contact information. So if you don't have it, their phone numbers at their office, their emails, how to get a hold of them. This is one of just many venues in which you can get a hold of those individuals who represent you in Topeka. I would encourage you, if you have questions that don't get answered today, to please contact them and let them know what is important. It shouldn't be a month before you see them again. It shouldn't be a month before you talk to them again. So going to circulate these around the room. Please take them, share them with others, and keep in contact with individuals who are representing you in Topeka.
The holiday? Your favorite holiday?
All right, ladies. What you
I
got?
can start.
Okay.
All right. Is this working?
I don't know. Is it working?
It's on. It's not working.
Maybe you should.
Give me the turn on over here.
Are you covering smuggling?
Yes.
Okay.
Test, test. This one works.
Oh, okay, there you go.
This is weird that this is not working. Okay. All right, I'll start with the favorite holiday. Christmas is my favorite, and I am a believer in God, and I love the fact that we get to celebrate Jesus' birthday, and I love presents, and love family, and I love little kids being excited. I actually have, I know we're supposed to do two people, but I have a couple of females and a couple of males that I go to on the when I'm there for advice. Actually, Senator Tyson is one of the people that I call, and I also call Senator Kelly Warren for advice and help on things. When it comes to the men that I look for support and just advice, I go to Senator Mike Thompson on a regular basis, and I also call the Attorney General's office, Charles Macheers, and talk with him about things as well. So those are some of the people that I go to for help and support and advice. And then three bills, and there's our senator. Well, I just am announcing it because you're one of the people I go to, so we just are going through that. My three bills, one of them, my favorite one that maybe people won't talk about as much, but it's one that Representative Schmoy and I have worked on together since last summer, and that is the bill on human smuggling. It's HB 2350, and it is something that's coming along quite nicely. It's pretty uncommon for freshman legislators to get a bill through, and this one's not through yet, but it is getting very close to it. And this would stop the people who are actually transporting humans for profit and for business to take advantage of people. So this is going after those folks that we call the coyotes that are doing this for profit, and this often leads to other issues with labor trafficking, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and so this is really important to us. And so it has passed the House, it has passed the Senate, and so because the Senate Judiciary put an amendment into it, which was actually, this is working now. Oh, okay.
Perfect.
Perfect. I'll hand this back to you. Thanks. All right, think now it's working, yep. So with the human smuggling piece of it, it went through the Judiciary Committee, and they put an amendment which was actually approved. So now it'll go to Conference Committee, and hopefully that will happen here soon, and then have the governor sign it. So that's something we're really excited about. The other two bills that I'm excited about, and actually it's part of the reason why I won my seat, which is fairness in women's sports. That is something that is really important in protecting our girls' rights. I have two girls, they're both athletes. I was an athlete, and it's extremely important for them to be able to compete on a level playing field. And then the other one is the Women's Bill of Rights, which ties into, I think, that bill as well, which is really the making sure that we know how to define a woman and be able to protect women's rights. Not that we're taking other people's rights away, but we need to make sure that the women that we are today, me being one specifically, feel very passionate about being able to protect those. So those are my three bills.
Good morning. Okay.
All right. I will also start with my favorite holiday, and that is Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is by far my favorite holiday because for me, growing up, it meant family. It meant that my entire extended family was going to come together, and we were going to be in the same place at the same time, sharing stories and a meal, and just really being able to remind ourselves and one another that we do represent something bigger, that it is not just, you aren't just alone, and you aren't just trying to navigate the world by yourself, but you have this amazing support system in place that you can draw from and go to and learn from. And we don't, as you get older and you start having the adult conversations, we don't always agree on every little thing, but what we do agree on is family is important and should be looked at as something that is valuable. By two people that I go to a lot, Representative Leah Howell, she sits right next to me on the House floor, and I ask her questions all the time. She is out of Sedgwick County, and she is just a phenomenal lady. She always has an answer, and we always seem to end up sharing snacks and just having a good time, making sure that everybody is kind of understanding what the process is, because more so than anything else, we all go into this kind of understanding who we are and what our values are and how we feel about things. We all kind of go into this understanding the makeup of our district. What's harder is really learning the process. And there were a few different processes that happened this last week that all of us sitting out there were kind of wondering what was going on, because it had been so long since some of the challenges had come up. And so it's always good to have somebody right next to you that you can go to for advice or that you can navigate together. Another one that I go to a lot is Representative Stephen Owens, and he's out of Harvey County, and he actually sits on the Juvenile Justice Committee that originally heard Representative Barth and I's bill about the human smuggling, and they were able, he and the rest of the committee were really able to help us with creating the amendments that were adopted on the House side and talking through the amendments that were adopted on the Senate side, so that we could all make sure to make this the best bill possible and tailor it so that it did what the intent was. And it really does make a big difference. You go into these things and you have this broad idea, and then you get feedback, and then you're able to use that feedback in order to make sure that this bill is the best bill it can possibly be by the time it hits the House floor and the Senate floor. And then 3 bills. One of them is the ESG bill, and we talk a lot up there about making sure to protect people and also to try to navigate, really thread the needle between protecting the individual's right to choose what they want to invest in, while also making sure that you are working with companies that are not using discriminatory practices. And so the ESG bill that we heard in the Financial Committee and that passed out of the House floor, that was a big deal for me. And it really is just the first step. This particular bill only addresses capers, and it only addresses what the state is putting money into on behalf of the members. Outside of that, we will be taking steps to look at other businesses that are engaging in discriminatory practices. So that is still coming. Another one, HB 2225, was the one that helps lower the electric rates. And so we heard a lot about, from both sides, about, well, we can't support this bill because it gives this side more control or that side more control. And what it really boiled down to was we passed this bill to ensure that the constituents of Kansas, all of us, including your representatives and your senators, all of us see some kind of relief on the energy bills that are skyrocketing. That's affecting every Kansan, and it's a place to start. And then the other one that was an incredibly emotional bill that we heard recently was the Born Alive Act. And that one, it gets misconstrued a lot. It gets placed into the category of abortion, and what the bill actually does is it is not addressing abortion. What the bill does is it sets a standard that in Kansas, if an infant is born alive and is no longer attached to the mother, is no longer part of the mother's body, if that infant is alive, then medical staff who have the ability actually are required to either administer, depending on gestational stage and viability, either administer life-saving care that you would administer to any other human being that was struggling for life, or give it dignity of death care. And so that was a very emotional bill that we heard, and it struck everyone to the core. I don't care what side you're on, it was emotional, and it was a hard conversation for 125 people to sit in a room and have, when you know that not everybody agrees, not everybody's on the same page. But I will always stand for doing whatever we can to save human beings, human life, and defend the most innocent. So those are my three.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you. And thank you, Carrie. That's so kind of you. I appreciate these two. They've done a great job. I often referred to myself as a red-shirted freshman when I was elected because I understood the process and knew the process. I feel the same about these two. They've engaged fully and wholeheartedly. And I hope the Senate didn't mess up your bill. I was reluctant to actually vote for the Senate version of it. The bill that they had put through would have stopped human trafficking, and it would have made it illegal. The language that was amended in the Senate made it only aliens, and that was quite disappointing. So I was extremely torn. Mentioned it in caucus, but it did not get enough traction for them to change it on the floor. So hopefully they'll go to conference committee and fix that language, because that is a big deal. Appreciate your guys' work on it. 3 bills that may not be addressed that are important to me. Well, they'll probably be addressed, but how many of you would like to see a limit on your valuation increases for property taxes? Oh, majority of the room. Yeah, I'm not surprised. That is a big issue. Have you guys heard that we're working on that? A few of you have, some of you haven't. That is a major issue. In fact, I've been spending much time on it. We've got a very small window Monday. If somebody will do a motion to reconsider, we could, otherwise it failed by 1 vote in the Senate. Hopefully we can get it. It was a bipartisan effort. There were Republicans and Democrats that voted to a constitutional amendment to allow you the opportunity to vote to limit valuation increases to 3%. Now, it would reset if you sold your property, if you made additions or anything like that, it would reset the value. The Senate president gave a very eloquent argument on it because they're saying, how is that fair with the valuations? Well, it's absolutely fair. In fact, it's more fair than the system we do now. Because what we do now is if somebody remodels or sells their property in your neighborhood, well, your valuation goes up. You didn't do anything to your property, but your valuation went up. If we could pass this constitutional amendment, then you would be limited to a 3% valuation increase unless you did something to trigger it. It's not going to stop property tax increases, okay? Locals still have local control. They can still raise the mill levy, but it does stop these valuation increases. One of our neighbors, 90% valuation increase in 1 year. Nobody sold their property around. Yeah, they can't figure it out either. It was kind of funny because after the debate Wednesday, I got a text from one of the senators. He got home and opened up his valuation notice, 35% increase in 1 year. So he sure would like to see this passed. But so I'll put that on your radar. The other one on my radar, it's probably on yours too, I would like to expand the property tax freeze for seniors and disabled veterans. The way the parameters were written on it, it's pretty strict. Not many people qualify. We'd like to open that up a little and get more people to qualify for that program. The Senate actually passed a couple of versions of it. The most recent one we passed would increase the valuation of the home to $495,000 from $350,000, and it would increase the household income from $75,000. It's currently at $50,000. It also, currently you have to subtract 50% of your Social Security. This would allow you to subtract 100% of your Social Security. So more people would qualify for the program if we're able to get this passed. Hopefully we can. And I know this one's on your radar. This is a big one for me. I don't benefit personally from any of these, but the one that I would like to see also is exempting Social Security from state income tax. I have been working on that for years. You guys have heard me. I'm a broken record on it. I will continue to be a broken record until we get it passed. we have gotten, what happens up there is, you know, you come up with an idea, and then it takes convincing either majority or super majority, depending on what you're working on, to that it's a good idea. And so finally, this year, both chambers are in agreement. It is a good idea. It wasn't my idea. I give full credit, but I loved it, and I picked up and have been championing the issue ever since. So hopefully we'll get that passed. I could give you some others that aren't on your radar that need to be, but election primaries, there was an ethics bill that passed, Senate Bill 208. I voted no. The Senate did not get to have input to it. It was a motion to concur, and I just didn't agree with the language that it was changing. I absolutely want transparency and ethics, and this would it would move in the other direction in decreasing the authority of Kansas Ethics Commission. So the other one I'll put on your radar is firefighters. It helped. They were not able to have an option. They were inadvertently left out, district firefighters, on an option for capers, and so we included them in that option too. So one female and male?
One female, one male.
Okay, so the female would be former Senator Susan Waggle. She was very good at the legislative process, and much like me, very compassionate and cares about her constituency. The other one you won't be surprised at all is my father-in-law, Robert Tyson. He's who I call to help me avoid some landmines up there in that building, honestly. He did a great job, and I'm very proud to be able to call him, and I'm lucky, my husband, he's my rock, and yes, he is here today. But it's nice to have those sounding boards, you know, to call and say, hey, I'm looking at this bill, what do you think? And they'll say, oh, no, well, that's garbage, you can't even consider it. So, but it's good. So my favorite holiday, I love holidays, Easter coming up, but my favorite would be Thanksgiving. I truly love the family, friends, and time of reflection to be thankful for what we have.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to start with one question, then we'll ask audience for a question. So in 1961, Article 12, Section 5 of the Kansas Constitution was added by the vote of the people, which gave cities the authority to determine their local affairs, including levying of taxes, excises, fees, charges, and other ancillary things. This amendment is known as Home Rule. HB 2446, which was passed by the House, prohibits and restricts the imposition of a fee to any ancillary containers. How did our House representatives vote on this bill, and how did your vote honor Home Rule? And then furthermore, for Senator Tyson, this bill now sits in Senate Commerce, and you're a member of that, and what are your thoughts on this bill, and how do you anticipate voting?
Which number was that, Bill?
2446. It's the plastic bag bill.
Oh.
I can start off with it. Actually, there was a version of this in the Senate Commerce to begin with, and it didn't come out of committee. Well, that kind of tells you, doesn't it? Yeah, it didn't have the votes to even get out of committee. So if the House version's come over yet.
It is. It's
okay.
on Commerce now.
Okay. Well, and the nice thing, well, I guess it's nice on some issues not so nice. We're finished with committees. We finished those over a week ago. Now we finished floor work last Wednesday. The place that we are in process now is conference committee reports. It's a very important time of session because it's negotiating between the two chambers. And we're going to have to hold each conference committee 2 feet to the fire because like we saw with Senate Bill 208, it comes out and it didn't even go to conference. We tried to make a motion to send it to conference I supported that at first, but then I decided not to because I didn't like the legislation at all. I just thought it should go down, but it didn't. It didn't. So that's where we're at now. We have to make sure that we are on our toes and watching everything that comes across our desk at this point.
I would say on that bill specifically, it's one of those that, sometimes we get bills brought to us that we're like, why do we have to vote on these bills, in my opinion, in some ways. I think the last several years with COVID, I've seen a lot of government overreach across the board that I've not been real pleased with. And I don't really even think local government should be able to tell businesses that you can't use plastic or not either. I think that should be the business's option and choice to be able to do so. And the fact that there are cities in the state of Kansas trying to control what businesses can do in that regard is one of the things that concerns me. And so we'll see where that bill goes.
Cities in your district?
Yep. Well, partially, yeah. I mean, City of Lawrence is one of those. They're not fully in my district, but I do have a couple Lawrence addresses in my district.
I did vote yes on this. And basically, I'm going to echo what she said. It really does come down to, I don't know that government at any level should be dictating to the business what it can or cannot do. That is basically why when I talk about the ESG stuff that we have to thread a needle. And so as far as I was concerned with the information that I had at the time, this bill would make it more of a standard for Kansas and would not have it being dictated by your local government what the business can and cannot do.
And how does that honor home rule?
Well, I think that it honors the individual. I think that it honors the individual that owns the business. And when it comes right down to it, I'm way more concerned about individual liberty.
Okay, so next question. And then Lewis is going to get to do his magic. Flat tax. It is one of the biggest changes that's being proposed to the tax code. Please explain what flat tax is for the average Joe and how it would benefit every single citizen and not just the wealthiest of Kansans.
I'd be glad to. And we're not looking at a flat tax, to be clear. Flat tax is not what's being considered. A single bracket is what's being considered, a single rate. And there is a difference, believe it or not. So the Senate passed a version that is 475. So it would take currently, and I'll give you a little bit of history on where we're at now and I won't go into where we came from, but I did not support where we're at now. It was a massive tax increase on low income and middle income families. What we were headed to in Kansas was we had cut individual income taxes starting in 2013. 12 was the business tax that was on, but there were actually cuts to individual income tax. Most people don't know this. In 13, 14, 15, 16, and 18 was another one. And what it was doing was we were getting to the point where if you were $20,000 or below on your state income tax, you would not have paid state income tax. That helps the low income, right? Well, the 2017 tax bill, anybody that voted for it, what they did was they took that exemption down to $2,500. Yeah. I tried to convince my colleagues. I tried to convince everyone. I showed them the numbers. I showed them graphs, and they just didn't want to hear it. All they heard was repeal the brown bag tax cuts. You know what? Even if you wanted to do that, don't harm the lowest income people in Kansas. And so that's what happened. So what we're looking at moving at, so we have 3 brackets in Kansas now. If you're 2,500 and below individual, then you do not pay state income tax. Anything above that $2,500 to $15,000, you pay 3.1% income tax.
Is that income?
Income tax.
25. Okay, no, 2,500 and yeah, so
25 and
those
below,
numbers.
you're exempt. Yeah, it would have
Yes.
been 20,000 and below. Yes, and so, so 15,000 to 30,000, your income, so it's stair-stepped. So your income, anything that you make, $15,001 to $30,000, this is for anyone, you're taxed at 5.25. Then when you go above the $30,001, you're taxed at 5.75. So the equation in the Senate was 475 exempting anything, and I don't remember the exact number. I think it's 6,000. I can't remember the exact number. But what we did was we did the math and we found the sweet spot so that it is absolutely not a tax increase for anyone in the state of Kansas. So there's a number that you subtract. It might be 5,000. I don't remember off the top of my head. But you subtract that number, everyone does, from their state income tax, and then your income tax is taxed at 575, your adjustable gross income. So, oh, I'm sorry, my husband corrected me. Thank God. 475. I've got too many numbers running through my head this morning. Yeah, it's so the Senate position was 475. The House position, I was getting ahead of myself. They're at 525 on a single rate. So you can tell what's going to happen here. We're going to go into negotiations, and we're going to meet in the middle. And if I was a betting person, which I'm not, I would say that we would land at approximately 495 is where we would land. But it makes sense for negotiations. And the interesting thing is the fiscal note, you heard that terminology, but the revenues that would not be collected as a result from 475 to 495 is a $60 million difference. So that's going to be the decision. Where do we want to land? Is that $60 million worth keeping in constituents' pockets, or do we keep it in the state coffers? And you guys know me. I want tax cuts. I want to be smarter, smaller government. The problem is we're going to have to be smarter at this point, because of what is going on with our economy, with our financial obligations. But I will be fighting for the taxpayer, because the more money we can keep in your pocket, the more that you will spend that money and recycle that money, and we'll collect it through sales tax and other items. I mean, I know that sounds horrible, but you do know with inflation, you guys heard me talk about this last time, the hidden tax. The state coffers and local coffers are going up because of inflation. The example I gave was a dozen eggs. If you spent $1 a month ago on a dozen eggs and you had a 10% tax, you paid 10%, 10 cents. So now we're at approximately, some told me we're already past it, $5 for a dozen eggs. Well, your tax is 50 cents. So within a month, without any government changing taxes or doing anything, you are paying 40 cents more into the coffers. So it's the reality of it. That's why they call it the hidden tax. And so I think we're in fine shape, but we just have to be cautious going forward. Although we do have over $1 billion in a rainy day fund, I think we can afford those tax cuts.
I would add just a couple comments on the tax, because I think we need lower taxes across the board. I think we need lower property taxes. We need lower income taxes. And, you know, on the House side, like Senator Tyson said, we were at 5.25%. I would have liked to have seen that at 5%. And if we could go lower, that would be awesome. The thing about it is, most people don't know, I was actually sitting on an amendment. I hadn't had a chance to talk to anybody in leadership. I hadn't had a chance to talk to my tax committee chair, but I actually had an amendment sitting there. Like, if I could have done it, I would have loved to have done it. I did not have what's called a fiscal note, though. And so my tax was what Senator Tyson mentioned, was the Social Security basic exemption. So especially the folks who are seniors or the folks that are disabled would have been able to take advantage of not having this additional taxation. It's a pretty big fiscal note, so, you know, we were operating pretty quickly. I didn't have the fiscal note, so I couldn't have debated or defended it appropriately. So, that's part of the things that, we're learning on what we can do. But again, it's going to probably go to conference committee and it's going to get hashed out there, and maybe somebody will carry that type of amendment to that committee, and maybe we'll get something positive for folks in that way. So know that we're trying to do what we can, but there are people that, I should say people, there's a process up there that we have to go through, and sometimes that process is difficult.
Honestly, I am so grateful for all of us, because all of us are constituents of our senator. And she is the numbers and tax guru. And so she is a resource not just for us and not just for the rest of the constituents that she serves, but she's a resource for everyone in that building. And so everyone, and I mean everyone, greatly respects her knowledge on this. I want to thank you, Senator, for your time and effort that you have put into this. And I know that you are not alone. We have a lot of people. We do have tax committees on both sides. And so the amount of work and the amount of negotiation, and everybody here knows that when you go into negotiations, you don't get everything that you want. And so I know that there were some things left on the table. I know that there were some things that were discussed that were not able to be put in the bill. And quite frankly, this is the best that they could do at this moment in time. And the fact that it doesn't change, it doesn't raise anyone's tax rate to begin with, is really pretty phenomenal. Because going through what we've seen before, having this opportunity before us right now is really a pretty outstanding opportunity for the state of Kansas, for everyone. And so it's one of those things. It's going to go to conference committee, and there are going to be more negotiations. And hopefully those negotiations lower this even further. Hopefully those negotiations make it even better for Kansans. But if we get stuck with the high side of this, we're still doing pretty good. So I was very happy to be in support of this bill.
All right, we're ready for questions. Who has a question? All right.
I'm Darrell McCune from here in Ottawa. This is based on an article from Thursday's Kansas Reflector. Representative Schmoy, you took part in a debate, I think, on the House floor Thursday. It was a bill on that it was eliminating the fee for concealed carry, correct? Well, the quote from the article states, and this is your words, "It means that you do believe in separate access to rights based on income, and that low income need not apply," Mr. Schmoy said. "I urge you to stand for the rights that we are granted, our natural God-given rights." I don't really care to discuss about the fee or not a fee. That's not important at this point, I think. But there is a much more fundamental issue, I think, from your statement that we should discuss. Throughout history, there are many people and many religions, including Christians, that have used God as the rationale for using violence against others. I would like you to explain the theological basis for your statement that carrying guns is a God-given right. And do you really believe that the teachings of Jesus support that kind of thinking? And if so, please tell us why.
Sell your cloak and buy a sword. That's where that comes from. The sword at the time was the most efficient and effective tool for self-defense. Life and the protection of life was important to Jesus. It is important to Christians. And when we have these kinds of conversations, I understand that not everybody likes the most effective and efficient tool available to us today. I get that. But it really is all about the defense of life. And so when Jesus said, when it's in the red letters, sell your cloak and buy a sword, I'm going to take that to mean that he understood that personal protection was important.
Next question, unless you wanted. Yes. Yes, Dennis, we want you to
Dennis
stand
George,
up.
Ottawa, Kansas. How are y'all? We'll start with an easy question, just like Ted Lasso. Easy question. There's a lot of workforce bills going through. Every industry has got a lot of issues in workforce and how we're doing it. Our healthcare organizations are working very collaboratively with all the different associations, as well as our Kansas Board of Regents, with the issues of trying to educate people to move into healthcare as one of the industries. I would like to understand, as we look at many industries struggling, I'm curious to understand what bills for workforce would you all consider as something to be supportive as we look at the struggles of many industry of attracting our talents into our industries.
So there's a bill that just passed the House, and the reason I'm aware of it is because the carrier of the amendment, Representative Sean Tarwater, sent me the video. And if you haven't seen it, it is compelling. It is a tax credit for employers to hire disabilities. Yeah, it is amazing. And it is a prime example of what we deal with in the political arena. It was so crushing. Groups came out hateful against him. They were showing up at his home with disabled individuals because they took his words out of context and reported them and said that he was against it. Well, when you hear his story, his brother had, I'll start tearing up. He had a head injury and was one of these disabled individuals. And then a good friend of his was also one. He is fighting for this group. And they turned that group against him. I mean, we deal with this often. Our words are taken out of context, or, somebody tries to portray that our intentions are not admirable. And boy, that was a prime example. That was a good bill. A couple of I read an article, and it was interesting that a lot of people don't want to return back to work now because of the benefits for not working. And we've created a scenario. Now, the ones that can't, we completely understand and they need help. But the ones that can, we all feel like they should return back to the workforce. And so we've created this catch-22 that we're in, and we need to address that issue. Government, we're looking to government to solve some problems that they're not, government sometimes just needs to get out of the way so that business and open free market can take care of the situation. But I'm going to jump really quick. When we talk about securities, and this was one of the items I thought about talking about that you guys wouldn't have on your radar, but we've got a major issue with China and other countries and our national security. And they're debating whether we should allow Americans to use TikTok or not, an IT application. Well, my husband knows, you guys know, I'm in software, I'm in IT. There's no way I would have downloaded those things. In fact, Zoom meetings, I'm very cautious. We've got one machine that we will use a Zoom meeting for. That's it. We do not download those applications on other machines. We need to be aware. In the workforce, you might say, well, how does that impact us? Well, it does impact us because we need the technology for the workforce, but we need to be careful how we're using it too.
There are a number of bills that we've seen on the House side, whether they made it to the floor or not, that talk about apprenticeship style workforce issues. And one of the ones that really struck close to home for me was one that we included paras working towards being teachers. As a former para and knowing the structure there, that you already, as a para, you already know the kids know you. You've built that trust, you've built that relationship. The staff in the school, it's the same. You've already built that structure there. And so the idea of a para being able to use some of the time that they've already spent in the classroom as that building block towards becoming a teacher, that was incredibly important to me. And we should be looking at doing those things in a number of different industries. And so we had several bills that dealt with that haven't made it to the House floor yet, but they're not dead. Of course, nothing in legislative world is ever truly dead. You see the same types of bills, different wording, sometimes the exact same wording come back session after session. And so I look forward to continuing to work on those and actually get a lot of implementation for everybody across the state to be able to take the time that you've spent in your workforce and use that to simultaneously build your career options. So that was a big one for me.
Another question?
Hi, I'm Eileen Spickler, and I live here in town. So my question is about the women's rights bill that was, I guess, passed in both houses. Anyways, I mean, both chambers. So part of what I see is that it's about defining people as handicapped for the sole purposes of their outward binary features. And what I mean is, what if someone is intersex, which formerly used to be hermaphrodite? They're born with features of both men and female. And, you know, so it would declare them disabled when maybe they don't want to be declared disabled. It could force parents to out their kids that don't want to be outed, and we all know kids can be really cruel and bullying. You know, you can't tell from outward features whether or not someone is born intersex. And I mean, intersex, people that are born intersex they're just people like the rest of us, and we're all children of God. So, you know, that's my question. How do you do that without outing people? And who's going to tell, especially in schools? Like, how can someone doesn't want to be identified? I mean, that's something I personally wouldn't want to identify as disabled with. So that's my question.
I can address that question. So I was on Health and Human Services Committee that heard that bill. I think it's SB 180. So what we did is we defined what a biological woman is at birth, right, as well as a biological male at birth. We heard testimony that was about the folks that are considered to be what's intersex, so their body parts don't maybe mesh up with their chromosomes. And so the way that the federal government has it described today was the amendment that was brought into the bill to be able, and it falls under the American Disabilities Act. That's how it is. And so we brought that in just to match up that language, because I do believe that that is a distinction that needs to be identified properly. It's less than 1%. I think it's like 0.001% of the population. So it is something to try to address those types of individuals that have that condition. And I know not everybody likes it, and they have the choice if they want to be called disabled or not. Technically it's not forcing anybody to. Well, never mind. Sorry.
Representative Schmoe, Senator Tyson, do either one of you want to address that matter?
I supported the legislation. We've, you know, who would have dreamed that we would have been here 5 years ago discussing what's male, female, what's not, which bathrooms, I mean, sports, the whole thing. I think, you know, and I get that these are important, but let's not take our eye off the ball, you guys. Security, finance, China, and these are important issues. As I said last week, you know, we don't get a choice what bills come before us. I wish we did. Boy, you'd see you guys know you'd see finance more fiscal if I was picking the bills that were coming in front of us. But we do have to debate, and we do have to vote and decide on that legislation, and I did support the definition of female.
I also supported the definition of female. Throughout statute in the state of Kansas, there are different references to male and female, and it is really, what it boils down to is it's cleanup language to ensure that we all know exactly what we're talking about when we are looking at these statutes. As far as my personal belief is God made them male and female. And there are instances where chromosomes do not match outward, and I do understand that. And I do acknowledge that they are designed by God, just the same as the rest of us. And so to give them personal consideration, I do understand that. And to give individuals compassion should be our utmost goal. As far as the government and the state is concerned, there is a difference between male and female. As far as biology is concerned, there is a difference between male and female. And the constituents who overwhelmingly voted me into office knew this going in. They knew that this was my stance. Whether you voted for me or not, you already knew how I was going to vote on this issue. And I just happened to be the one who is sitting up there and representing.
I have a question, then we'll go back to the audience. Opioids is wreaking havoc across our state, including here in our community. Senate Bill 174 would decriminalize fentanyl testing strips as well as other drug testing strips, and increase criminal penalties for manufacturing and distributing fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances. Tell me about your views on this bill.
I love the fentanyl portion of this bill. If they would have brought me a clean bill and it was about that, I would have voted for it. I would have been the first one to hit that button. Unfortunately, they also coupled in giving medical professionals specialized protections, and they increased the jurisdiction of police officers that wasn't really applying to the fentanyl part of that. And as far as everybody hates the bundling bills, and everybody hates it when you shove a bunch of stuff that may not pertain together, I actually voted no on that, and it was a really hard vote for me, because as far as the fentanyl issue that we have, I absolutely understand that that needs to be addressed. I was not willing to vote yes on that at the cost.
And this is something we actually voted differently on. We vote pretty similarly on a lot of things. This was one of those where it was hard. It was a bundled bill, and there were parts of it that I didn't actually like that much. With the fentanyl test strips and what that can do, and I actually believe that fentanyl test strips are not for the people who are taking drugs. I think it's for the folks of us that are not taking drugs, who are trying to make sure fentanyl is not weaved into the drugs that people actually need to take. And I know there's different opinions on that piece of it, but that's kind of how my belief is, so I did vote for that, mainly because of that.
Yes, and I voted no on the legislation. There were 2 or 3 items in it, and it just it wasn't enough good to for me to cross that line. But we will see this legislation again. I do know it's going to conference committee. It'll be interesting to see what they put with it. Yeah.
174.
Sorry.
Questions? Sorry, yes.
I'm Deidre Eltic. I'm from Ottawa. Rebecca, last time you said that you believed that the money for schools should follow the children. And in the voucher bill, I'm hoping that there's serious consideration on what happens if a homeschool parent takes the money and then eventually sends the child to public school. Is that money forfeited and given back to the middle or to the public school? What happens if a private school has children and then expels them or closes? That money goes back to the public school, because if the public school is being expected to educate those children, they deserve the money to do that.
I absolutely agree with you. As I said previously, the money should follow the student. As far as, yes, actually, they are working on the wording and making sure that things are not being fraudulently done. And that is actually what is being worked on. I believe it all runs through the treasurer now. So when the bill was set up, it was supposed to run through a committee, and then on the House floor, we amended it to where it would run through the treasurer's office. And then the treasurer's office would actually be able to look for instances of fraud and then treat them accordingly. And it is being called fraud if you do that.
Either one of you want to address?
Well, I would, there was a Senate bill, it took a different position, it was a tax credit. But what we did in that language, because we knew the House was working on theirs, we put a conditional clause in there that you couldn't stack it. You did one or the other, so you can't get the tax credit, you can't, if you either take the savings account or the tax credit, or you're in public school. But you can't stack it. That way, the money, the state's not tripling up on, or doubling up on funds.
We are just knocking on the 11 o'clock hour, and I was hoping that we could end with just a brief explanation. April 6th is first adjournment, and for those that are not politically active, that may sound like,
It's a big deal.
wow, what the heck is that? Please explain to us what first adjournment means, and if you're going to be on a conference committee, what conference committee will you be on, and what do you see yourself doing in the next in the next month?
I'll be glad to start. Well, thank you guys for coming out again, and thank you to our sponsors. We know these things don't just happen. It takes some work getting involved. So first adjournment is regular session. That means we're finished, we're adjourned, and then we will come back for veto session. And the leadership, the Senate president this year is trying to keep it truly what it was. In the past, you would see first adjournment and it wouldn't really mean much. You would still go on general orders. You would still go above the line. You would still do the things that you've been doing the last few months. However, they have made it clear, adamantly clear, that they will be not going on general orders, that it is truly going to be first adjournment. So if the legislation didn't make it across the floor in one chamber or the other, it's probably not going to see movement, hopefully not, that's the rules, this year. Doesn't mean it's dead, it just means it cannot be acted upon this year. So we still have an omnibus budget to pass. So I'm not sure, I have a feeling that's going to be built in conference committee too. We have many large pieces of legislation still left to come. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. The conference committees are interesting. Normally it is the chair, vice chair, and the ranking from each chamber that serve on the conference committee. However, the Senate president and the speaker are allowed to appoint whomever they want. So I can guess the odds are pretty high that I will be working on tax conference committee. Hopefully that's the case. We'll see. I don't know. I have been in the past, and I have been pulled in the past because they wanted legislation that had not passed either body, and I was not willing to put it in the conference committee report, so I got pulled. Could that happen again? Absolutely it could. I play by the rules. Some people may not like that, but I do play by the rules. And so I appreciate my Senate president. He's done a stellar job. It's been great to work with him this year. He's got some good policy that he wants, and I am all for it. And one of them is the single rate income tax. The other is him and I are both positioned on exempting Social Security from state income tax. We are both on board with that. We are both on board with trying to stop governments from competing with businesses. You should have freedom from government competition. Where that language ends, I'm not sure yet, but it just makes sense, right? If you start a business, you shouldn't be afraid of your government starting a business competing against you. So just some common sense legislation. That's what we'll be working on. But I appreciate your guys' questions. We have our newsletters. Please feel free. I gotta tell you though, the emails, there's a couple of activist groups that have decided that email is the best way to reach us. I am averaging 10 to 20 emails a day. And that I've got over 5,000 emails in my inbox right now, you guys. So I am trying to get through them. Just please understand and patience. You can leave a phone message. We'll try to get back with you as soon as possible. It's just these weeks tend to be, as the last weeks were, very intense. We had over 30 bills above the line 2 days in a row. We got the second list of bills, Tuesday's list, Monday evening at 10:01 p.m. So I was up all night reading bills. I'm not complaining. I'm just telling you that the process is very intense, and we need to focus on what's coming before us so that we don't miss anything. Thank you.
Senator Tyson brought up something good about the emails. So if you go through one of those activist sites and you click on it and it automatically generates an email to us and you don't change anything, it comes to me as Charity Engine sometimes is the email address. So I have no idea how to get a hold of you if you do that. Unless you put your contact information in there with your name and your address and your phone number and your email, then we can reach back out to you. Otherwise, I don't really have any way to talk to you about it. I am not on any conference committees. I don't think I have seen any freshmen be on conference committees as freshman legislators. Like she said, it's the chair, vice chair, and the ranking minority is typically who's on those. And I appreciate you guys all showing up and asking questions. Thank you.
As Representative Barth mentioned, as freshmen, we don't get the pleasure of being on the conference committees. We're not the people making the decisions. However, we do get to go in and watch them. We do get to go in and watch the negotiations and learn more about the behind the scenes and what is happening to these bills. And our human smuggling bill will be in a conference committee, and you can bet that we're going to be front row, right in the middle of that, making sure that what is happening is not detracting from the protection of these individuals that we are trying to protect. And so, and holding accountable the individuals that we are trying to hold to account. And so, although we don't get to sit on those committees and make the actual decisions, we do get to participate by learning and watching. That way, if we continue to be elected, if we continue to represent our districts, and eventually we work our way through and become a chair or vice chair, then we will already be that much further ahead of the game. We will already have that much information and understanding of how this process works so that we can do our job better for our constituents. First adjournment, I have watched politics for years and years, and as Senator Tyson said, it has not always meant what it sounds like it should mean, and we are very hopeful this year. It looks like leadership on both sides will actually adjourn, and we will actually take time off. And I know for a fact, because I had this conversation on nearly every doorstep that I was on over the summer, the less time your representatives are in Topeka, the better off it is for Kansas, because we're not messing things up if we're not up there messing things up, right? So it really comes down to the fact that we're doing the best we can for the people who sent us there and for the people who we see at ball games and see at the grocery store and walk through the district and go to events. And I mean, we're not your typical, you send us up there and you never see us again. This isn't the same as what it looks like at the federal level. We understand that when we come home, we answer to our neighbors. And so it's a great pleasure for me that so many of you guys show up in person, and everybody who actually watches from home. I appreciate that more than I can possibly convey, because whether we agree or not, I need to hear voices and opinions that do not echo my own. I need all the information before I go. I need to know what your concerns are. We might never agree. That doesn't mean that we get to ignore the rest of the people's opinions. We are only as good as having these conversations. And if we're not willing to have these conversations, even knowing that at the end of the day we aren't going to agree, then we shouldn't be in these positions. Thank you very much for coming.
So can I real quickly, and
Sure.
I appreciate, conference committees are open. They are open to the public. Anybody can attend. They are online. So you can watch them as you do watch session and committee, and I encourage it. kslegislature.org, kslegislature.org. I'm all about transparency. I know a majority of us are. In fact, I would say I can't imagine a legislator that's not open to transparency, and that's how the process needs to be.
Well, in the era of transparency, it is 11:08, and we did start a few minutes late, so I appreciate the fact that you all are willing to go a few minutes late with us today. Thank you so much for being here. It should be noted that you all come here and appear and talk to constituents on your own free time, and you're not required to be here, and so I appreciate the fact that, and I know that the individuals here appreciate the fact that that when you're busy in Topeka, you spend a Saturday morning where you could be doing 100 other things that are probably not done at your home.
Laundry.
Yes, I hear you. And you spend it here. So thank you so much. Before we adjourn for the day, and it is the final adjournment of this, I do want to take a moment, since I am here behind the mic, to wish happy first day of freedom to our city manager, who today is his very first day not as city manager, and I can't even say former city manager because I can't say that. But Richard Neinstead has done an amazing job of leading the city of Ottawa. So I appreciate it. I know the citizens appreciate it. You all will be busy, so thank you, Richard. You all will be very busy. We are kicking around some ideas of looking how it could look a little bit different after veto session, maybe having a wrap-up, lemonade and learn about what things have happened. And so Rylan and I are having that conversation, and I think the legislative committee may have that conversation too. So stay tuned, and hopefully we can have a wrap-up session as the summer begins. Thank you for being here, and